The shift order came on a flimsy data pad, delivered by a hovering drone that scanned Carter's retinal biometrics with a cold, blue light. He wiped a streak of grease from the screen. Reassignment. Sector 7. The Royal Wing. Carter frowned. The Royal Wing was a place janitors like him only ever heard about in hushed whispers. It was the gilded cage, the silent heart of the Thaler Empire's palace on this particular colonized rock. He was a floater, assigned to sanitation level 4, usually unclogging protein synthesizers or scrubbing the boot scuffs of lower-level officials. The Royal Wing was for vetted staff, for the silent and the invisible, for those who had never had a criminal thought, let alone a criminal past. Carter had a past, a long one, written in scar tissue under his gray uniform and filed away in a locked Earth-based data vault. He had been a part of something that failed, something that had cost him everyone he knew. Now he was just Carter, a human janitor, a second-class citizen paying off a debt to a galactic dynasty that saw his entire species as barely sentient help. Mysterious vacancy. His supervisor, a gelatinous Zothian named Mip, had gurgled over the comm. The last one a Xylos left in a hurry or in a body bag. Does it matter? The slot is open. You're quiet. You keep your head down. They requested someone who keeps their head down. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look at the royals. Do not breathe their air if you can help it. And Carter, to scrub your boots twice. He scrubbed his boots twice, passed through 5 different biometric checkpoints, and had his service chit scanned by towering 8-foot-tall Thalorian guards in polished armor. Their silver faces were impassive, their forearms crossed. They looked through him as if he were a stain they had not yet decided to remove. The air in the Royal Wing was different. It was still cold, and smelled of ozone and a faint, sweet floral scent that reminded him of funerals. The architecture was haunting. Walls were not walls, but flowing, solidified light, pulsing with a faint internal luminescence. Ceilings were not ceilings, but holographic projections of deep space, nebulae swirling in slow, majestic silence. It was the pinnacle of Thalor beauty, and it was as suffocating as a vacuum-sealed tomb. His new route ended at a set of towering obsidian doors. A guard, this one even larger, nodded once. The Princess Sayalari, you will clean her chambers. You will touch nothing but the floors, the refuse containers, and the air filters. You will not look at her. You will not speak. Her current attendant will list your duties. You are her new pet. Try to remember it. The word pet stung, but Carter had been called worse. He inclined his head, the universal gesture of human servitude, and entered as the doors hissed open. The chambers were vast, a cavern of shimmering crystal and deep purple fabrics. Light poured in from a wall that was not a wall, but a window overlooking a garden of impossible, glowing flora. And in the center of the room, stark against the alien beauty, was the princess. She was stunning. He had seen the dynasty's images broadcast across the stars, but the vids did them no justice. She was Thalorian royalty, descended from a line that had conquered worlds. Her skin was a pale, luminous silver, her hair a cascade of white gold that seemed to capture the light. Her features were sharp, regal, and terrifyingly beautiful. She wore a simple silk robe, and even sitting, she possessed a bearing that radiated absolute ancient power. But she was not standing. She was seated in a high-tech floating chair, a sleek black construct of metal and light that hovered 3 feet off the ground. Her legs, long and seemingly perfect, were still, utterly still. They were draped in the silk, but they were lifeless, like appendages on a beautiful broken doll. Her eyes, the color of a blue star, snapped to him. They were not sad. They were cold, hard, and filled with a bottomless glacial fury. A small, trembling Thalorian attendant, a male with nervous, twitching antennae, scurried over. "This is the human, Your Highness. The replacement." Princess Sayalari did not look at the attendant. Her gaze remained locked on Carter, dissecting him. "A pet. My father sent me a pet." Her voice was like cut glass, precise and sharp. How fitting. A broken thing to clean the chambers of a broken thing. The attendant flinched. "Your Highness, I will show him the sanitation protocols." "Leave it," she commanded. The attendant bowed so low his antennae brushed the floor, and then he practically ran from the room. The obsidian doors hissed shut, leaving Carter alone with the crippled princess in a room that felt suddenly, terribly small. The silence that followed was a weapon. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating. Carter kept his eyes down, his gaze fixed on the gleaming, seamless floor. He could feel her watching him, her hatred a palpable, physical force. "What do they call you? Human?" she asked. Carter paused. He was not supposed to speak. He looked at a spot on the floor just to the left of her chair. "Carter, Your Highness." "Carter," she savored the word, then spat it out. "A dull name for a dull creature. Begin your work. I want to see how well my new pet scrubs." He unclipped the compact sanitation unit from his belt. It hummed to life, a low, quiet sound. He started in the far corner, polishing the crystalline floor, his movements economical and practiced. He had cleaned worse places. He had cleaned blood from resistance bunkers and filth from prison cells. A pristine royal chamber was nothing. But the silence was days melted into a gray, oppressive routine. Carter would arrive at the 7th hour. He would clean. Princess Sayalari would be there, always there, in her floating chair. Sometimes she was by the window, staring at the alien sky. Sometimes she was at a data console, her fingers flying over holographic keys, her face a mask of concentration. Most often she was simply there, in the middle of the room, watching him, her stillness a roaring accusation. She rarely spoke to him again. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of his polisher and the faint whisper of her chair's propulsion unit. He learned the geography of her prison. He learned that she never touched the replicator for food when he was present. He learned that she kept a single withered flower from the garden in a stasis field by her bed. He learned that she had a network of surveillance systems embedded in the walls, and sometimes he would see the tiny optical lenses shift to follow him. The rumors were easy to find. The other servants, a mix of lesser alien species and a few indentured humans, whispered in the maintenance tunnels and the nutrient stations. "The explosion," a one-eyed Grishnok whispered, polishing a glass, "took out her whole honor guard and her legs. Spinal cord fried. I heard it was her cousin," a human woman named Alara muttered, sorting uniforms. "Lord Vorlag, he's the one who got her command, got her seat on the council. He visited her, they say, after she woke, smiled at her, told her to recover with dignity. They've sidelined her," the Grishnok said, his one eye swiveling nervously. "The Empress-to-be. Now she's just the damaged goods. Her own father, the Emperor, can't stand to look at her. Gave her the human as an insult, a reminder that she's worth less than the dirt on his boot." Carter listened, and he cleaned. He saw the way she would sometimes try to move her legs, a flicker of silver muscle under the skin, a command sent from her brain that found no purchase. He would see her fist clench on the arm of her chair, her knuckles white. He would see her catch her reflection in the polished floors. See the rictus of self-loathing twist her beautiful face before she smoothed it back into an icy mask. One evening, he was cleaning the alcove near her bed. He was trying to be invisible, as always. She was drinking. A tall, elegant bottle of something electric blue sat on the table beside her. Her hand was unsteady. She reached for the glass and her fingers fumbled, knocking it to the floor. It did not break. The crystalware of the thaler was stronger than steel. It just bounced, skidding across the floor and spilling its blue contents. Sayalari let out a sound, a choked, furious hiss. "Useless," she whispered. Then her eyes found him. "You," she snapped. "Cleaner, mop, pet, whatever you are, clean it." Carter moved, his polisher extending a sanitation nozzle. He was about to vaporize the spill when she spoke again. "No. With your hands. On your knees. Like the animal you are." Carter stopped. He looked at her. Her eyes were bright, feverish with alcohol and rage. She wanted a reaction. She wanted him to grovel, or to defy her so she could have him punished. He looked at the spill, then at her. He said nothing. He simply knelt, pulling a high absorbency cloth from his belt. He wiped up the sticky, sweet-smelling liquid, his movements calm, methodical. "Is that all you are?" she hissed, her voice trembling. "A machine? A mindless drone? You humans are pathetic. You conquered your own world just to lose the galaxy. You stink of protein and failure. You have no fire, no honor. You just scrub." He finished wiping. He folded the cloth, tucked it away, and stood. He looked at her, not at her eyes, but at her face. He saw the pain coiled behind the hate, the desperate, lonely girl rattling around inside the iron cage of the princess. "No, Your Highness," he said, his voice quiet, impossibly calm in the vast, silent room. "We just have patience." He expected her to scream, to call the guards. He expected to be vaporized on the spot. Instead, she just stared at him. The fury in her eyes faltered, replaced by a sudden, stark confusion. He had not been afraid. He had not groveled. He had not defied. He had simply answered. She had tried to cut him, and he had refused to bleed. She said nothing else for the rest of his shift, but she did not look away. Not once. That night, Sayalari sat in the dark. The blue liqueur was bitter on her tongue. Her legs ached, a phantom burning pain that the healers said was impossible. She was trapped in this room, in this body, in this life that was no longer a life. She activated the surveillance feed for her own chambers. It was a habit she had developed, to watch the recordings, to see herself as others saw her, a broken, pathetic creature. But tonight, she switched to the live feed. It was past the third sleep cycle. The human, Carter, was back. Not her chambers, but the antechamber, the great hall outside her doors. He was part of the night crew now, scrubbing the main thoroughfare. She watched him. He was alone. The vast, luminous hall empty save for his small, gray figure. He moved with a strange, weary grace. He was mopping, an old-fashioned hydraulic mop, not a high-tech vaporizer. He was humming. Sayalari magnified the audio. It was a low, tuneless sound, but it was melodic. Then he stopped mopping, leaning on the handle, and looked up at the holographic nebula on the ceiling. He spoke. His voice was a whisper, so low she had to strain the sensors to catch it. "Do not go gentle into that good night," he murmured, the words alien to her, in a language she did not know. "Old Earth. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light." He was quiet for a moment, then went back to mopping, the soft swish-swish echoing in the hall. Sayalari sat frozen in her chair. Rage. He spoke of rage. She knew rage. Rage was her only companion. But this was different. It was not the cold, dead hate she felt. It was fire, a fire she had once had, the fire that had been blown out of her in a blinding, white-hot explosion. She looked at the calm button by her bed. She was drunk. She was lonely. She was curious. And for the first time in months, she was something other than bored. She pressed the button. Carter was stripping the last filter from the air circulation unit when the summons chimed. It was not his supervisor. It was the internal comm, the one from her bed. He hesitated. This was not protocol. This was dangerous. But a summons from a royal was a command. He cleaned his hands on a sanitation wipe and walked to the obsidian doors. They slid open before him. She was in the dark, save for the faint glow of the city lights from the window. The room was cold. The bottle of blue liqueur was empty. "Pet," she slurred as he entered. "You came. So obedient." He stood just inside the doorway, a silent sentinel. "Come closer," she commanded. He moved, stopping a respectful 10 feet from her chair. "Closer." He moved again, until he was standing just beside her. He could smell the alcohol on her breath, a sharp, chemical tang under the floral perfume. She looked up at him, her beautiful face blurred by sorrow and drink. "They say I am useless," she whispered, her voice cracking. "A symbol of a fading line. My cousin wears my robes, my father will not see me. And they gave me you, a human janitor, to complete the humiliation." Carter said nothing. He just waited. She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You are all I have, a pet, a silent gray thing. Are you even real? Or are you just another ghost in my tomb?" She reached out, her silver fingers brushing the rough gray fabric of his uniform. Her touch was cold. "You intrigue me, pet," she said, her voice dropping. "You do not cower. You do not flatter. You just clean. And you whisper poems in the dark." Carter's body went rigid. She had been watching. Of course she had. "What will you do?" she mocked. "If I tell the guards you are a poet, will they promote you or will they snap your dull little neck?" "Whatever Her Highness commands," Carter said, his voice flat. She studied him, her blue eyes searching his face in the dim light. "You are not afraid of me." It was not a question. "No, Your Highness." "Why?" "You are not the scariest thing I have ever seen." Her hand, which was still on his sleeve, tightened. What a very, very strange answer. She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked away from him, toward the vanity, where a silver-backed brush lay. "Brush my hair," she whispered. Carter blinked. "Your Highness? You heard me." Her voice was suddenly sharp, imperious. "My attendant is asleep. My hand is shaking. I want my hair brushed, and you are here. Do it." This was a test. Everything was a test. He could be executed for touching her. He could be executed for refusing. He picked his poison. He walked to the vanity and picked up the brush. It was heavy, exquisitely carved. He moved behind her chair. Her hair was a river of white gold, spilling over the back. He hesitated. Then his hand, the hand of a janitor, a criminal, a survivor, touched the hair of a princess. He drew the brush through it. It was like combining silk. He was gentle, methodical, and his movements practiced. He had done this before, a lifetime ago, for someone else, someone who was now dust. He worked through the tangles, his strokes long and even. The tension in her shoulders began to ease. He saw her eyes close in the reflection of the dark window. A small, involuntary sigh escaped her. It was the most human sound he had ever heard her make. He brushed, and the silence in the room changed. It was no longer a weapon. It was a blanket. The hum of the city far below was the only sound. She let him brush for several minutes, her head tilted, lost in the simple physical sensation. Finally, she spoke, her voice thick, heavy with a sorrow that went beyond the alcohol. "Is this what you are?" she challenged, her voice low, her eyes finding him in the reflection. "A cleaner of things no one wants to touch, a polisher of broken relics? Is that all you are good for? Human?" She was talking about her hair. She was talking about her chambers. She was talking about her legs. She was talking about herself. Carter's hand stopped. The brush hovered. He met her gaze in the dark glass. His own reflection was a gray shadow behind her silver. Shining one. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the challenge, the plea for him to say something that was not a lie and not a platitude. He lowered the brush. His voice was as steady and quiet as the deep space between stars. "Some things," he said, "just need patience to shine again." He watched her reflection. Her breath hitched, her silver skin flushed, her perfect lips parted, the glacial ice in her eyes, the hard, cold fury she had worn like armor, cracked. It did not melt, but it cracked, and underneath it, a flicker, a small, dangerous, white-hot ember. It was not hope. It was something far more primal. It was a curiosity. It was desire. It was the sudden, shocking, and terrifying will to feel. The night he had brushed her hair hung between them, an unspoken, shimmering thing. Carter returned to his duties the next day at the 7th hour, his face the same impassive mask, his movements just as economical. He entered her chambers, expecting the cold fury, the glacial silence to have returned, reinforced and colder than before. Instead, she was waiting for him, not by the window, but at her data console. "The air filter in the south alcove is whining," she said, her voice crisp. "See to it." He inclined his head and went to work. The silence stretched, but it was different. It was no longer a weapon but a space filled with questions. As he recalibrated the filter unit, he spoke, his voice quiet, not looking at her. "Your Highness, the carvings on the archway by the door, what do they signify?" She turned from her console, her blue eyes narrowing. "You are a janitor. You are not an art historian. Clean, and be silent." "My apologies," Carter said. He finished with the filter and moved to polish the floor near the archway, his eyes tracing the ancient swirling script. He was quiet for almost 5 minutes before she spoke, her voice laced with annoyance. "It is the oath of censure, a promise our ancestors made to the first star, that we would cut away weakness from our line, lest it poison the whole." "A harsh promise," Carter murmured, his cloth moving in steady circles. "It is a necessary one," she retorted. "Non-weakness is a disease, and it spreads. It invites predators. Look at your own species. You were weak. You were conquered." "And yet," Carter said, looking up at the carving, "we are still here, cleaning the homes of our conquerors." Sayalari stared at him, a sharp retort on her lips, but it died. He was not arguing. He was stating a fact. His presence was, in itself, a testament to a stubborn, enduring kind of strength. He went back to cleaning, but the space between them was alive now. He would ask questions, simple ones, about the hollow projection of a battle on her wall, about the faint melodic chimes that sounded on the hour. She tested him, She met his curiosity with sharp retorts, with insults about his species, his station. But she always, eventually, answered. She found herself explaining the complex lineage of the Taylor dynasties, the principles of her fleet's plasma drive engines, the symbolic meaning of the withered flower she kept in stasis. It was from the Victory Garden on Xylos, she snapped one afternoon, when she saw him looking at it. After my first campaign. Now stop staring and clean the refuse unit. Your human eyes contaminate it. He learned to navigate her moods, to read the subtle shift in her posture, the tightening of her silver hands on the arms of her chair. And he watched her. He watched her when she thought he was not looking. He was cleaning the vast mirror wall that faced the gardens when he saw it. She was staring at her reflection. But she was not looking at her face. She was looking at her legs. Her expression was not sadness. It was a cold, distant hatred. He watched in the glass as her hand, slow and hesitant, moved down to her left thigh. She touched the silk-covered limb, touched it, then pinched the skin, hard. Her face remained impassive. She was testing the nerves, searching for a flicker of response that never came. She was touching her own legs as if they were alien objects, strangers that had grafted themselves to her body. Carter stopped polishing. The squeak of the cloth on the glass was the only sound. He did not turn. He just watched her reflection. "They are not the enemy, Your Highness," he said, his voice a low murmur. She started, her hand flying from her leg as if it were on fire. Her eyes, filled with venom, snapped to his reflection. "What did you say to me? Human." He turned slowly, his face calm. "I see how you look at them. They are not a separate thing. They are not your enemy. They are just quiet." "You know nothing," she hissed, her voice trembling with a sudden raw fury. "You know nothing of what I am. You are a pet, a cleaner of floors." "I know about nerve damage," Carter said, his voice unshaken. "I know about atrophy. I know what happens when muscles are forgotten. They die." Her fury faltered, replaced by a sudden, sharp suspicion. "How would you know of such things?" "Humans are fragile," he said. "We broke ourselves for centuries, long before Thalor arrived. We learned to put the pieces back together. Sometimes the body needs to be reminded of what it was." She stared at him, her chest rising and falling. "Reminded? The healers have tried. Machines, electrostimulation, nothing. They are healers, Your Highness. They are afraid of hurting you. They are afraid of you." He took a step closer, a violation of protocol. She tensed, her hand moving toward the comm button. "I heard them in the halls. They say the nervous system is still half functional. The pathways are not all destroyed, and they are just asleep." "What are you suggesting?" she whispered, her voice dangerous. "I am suggesting," he said, "that the machines do not know where to push, but hands do." He held up his own. They were not the hands of a prince. They were calloused, the knuckles scarred, the nails short and clean. "I am a janitor. I am paid to touch the things no one else will. May I?" It was the single most audacious, treasonous, and insane proposal ever uttered in that room. Sayalari should have had him vaporized. She should have called the guards and had him spaced for his insolence. She laughed, a dry, humorless scoff. "You? A human? You want to put your filthy human hands on me?" "Yes, Your Highness," the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it stunned her. He was not afraid. He was not pleading. He was offering. She looked at his hands, then at her useless, perfect legs. What dignity did she have left to lose? Her father had given her this human as a joke. Her cousin ignored her. She was a relic, a broken symbol. "Tonight," she said, her voice dropping so low he barely heard her. "After the third cycle, the guard changed. If you speak of this to anyone, I will have your tongue ripped out." "Yes, Your Highness," Carter said. He turned and went back to polishing the mirror, as if he had just been discussing the weather. That night, he came. not in his gray janitor's uniform, but in simple dark trousers and a soft sponge shirt. He looked less like a servant and more like a man. He brought a small container. "It is a nutrient lotion," he explained, seeing her eyes on it. "From the medical bay, standard issue. It prevents skin chafing." She was in her chair, in the center of the darkened room. She had not been able to sleep. She was terrified. She was thrilled. "Do not," she began, her voice rough. "I will not hurt you," he said. He did not kneel at her feet, a servant groveling. He brought over a low stool and sat before her, bringing him almost to her level. "I will be respectful, Your Highness, but I cannot be gentle. The muscles will not respond gently." She nodded, a single sharp jerk of her head. He uncovered her left leg from the silk robe, his movements practiced and impersonal. He did not look at her face. He focused on her leg. He poured a small amount of the lotion onto his palms and began. Her first instinct was to recoil. His hands were warm, impossibly warm. Her skin, which had not felt a human touch in almost 2 tingled as if struck by 1,000 tiny needles. His grip was firm, strong, and clinical. He stared at her calf, his thumbs pressing deep into the silver-colored muscle, kneading, rolling. It was not a caress. It was work. "You are strong," she breathed, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. "I was," he said, his breath steady. "The work keeps me going." He moved to the tendons behind her knee, his fingers probing. The healers were right. The tissue is dormant, but it is not dead. It is just waiting. He moved to her thigh, his hands working the long, elegant muscle that had once propelled her through royal courts and across battlefields. Sailari's eyes squeezed shut. Memories, sharp and violent, flooded her. The heat of the Xylo's sun on her skin, the burn of a 3-mile run, the feeling of her legs coiled, ready to spring as she faced down a Grishnak rebel leader. And then, the explosion, the white light, the searing, unimaginable pain. And then, nothing. The cold, dead silence of her own body. "Breathe, Your Highness." Carter's voice cut through the memory. His thumb pressed into a deep nerve cluster on her inner thigh. A violent electric shock shot up her spine. Her entire leg spasmed, kicking out, striking him in the chest. Sailari cried out, her eyes flying open. Carter had not moved from the stool. Though the blow had been solid, he was staring at her leg, now trembling. "It moved," she whispered, her voice choked with disbelief. "It moved." "A reflex," Carter said, his voice carefully neutral, though he could see the wild hope in her eyes. "A memory. The pathway is still there." "Do it again," she commanded, her voice fierce. He did. He worked for an hour. He worked until his shoulders burned and his hands ached. He worked until she was breathing hard, her silver skin flushed, her body alive with phantom heat and tingling memory. He worked until her leg was no longer just a silver-hued stranger, but a part of her again. When he was finished, he gently covered her leg. He stood, retrieved his lotion, and bowed. "Tomorrow," she said. It was not a request. "If you wish, Your Highness." He left. Sailari sat in the dark, her hand pressed to her thigh. It was warm, his warmth. And for the first time since the explosion, she did not feel like a ghost. The massages became a ritual. He would arrive on the 3rd cycle, and he would work. And they would talk. The room, once a tomb, became a sanctuary. The darkness, once an enemy, became a friend. The silence, once a weapon, became a canvas. He would kneel, and his hands would begin their work, and she would ask questions. "Why are you humans so stubborn?" she asked one night, her voice musing. My father's armies crushed your unified colonies in 6 months. Your species was broken, scattered, and assimilated, yet you persist. You are like weeds in the cracks of our empire. A weed, Your Highness, Carter said, his hands working her ankle, is just a flower in a place the gardener did not want it. And stubbornness, we call it survival. We lost the war, yes, but we are still here. And you, she asked another night, her head tilted back, her eyes on the holographic stars on her ceiling. Why are you never afraid? I see how the guards look at me, my attendants, even my cousin Vorlag when he bothers to visit. They are all terrified of me, of what I was, of what I am. But you, I threatened to have you flayed. You just looked bored. Why? Carter's hands stilled for a moment. He looked at her, his face lit by the faint blue light of the star field. When you have watched your entire world burn, Your Highness, you stop being afraid of the fire. You just get very, very tired of the ashes. She saw the shadow that passed over his face, a darkness so profound it made her own sorrow feel small. The ritual changed. He would arrive, and she would be ready. She would be wearing silks, not just utility robes. Her white gold hair, which she had once left to tangle, would be brushed, gleaming. She would have the faintest trace of kohl around her eyes, making them seem even brighter. She was preparing for him. She was making herself royal again, not for her court, but for her janitor. One night, as he was working on her left leg, it was responding more now, the twitches more frequent, the warmth lasting longer. She spoke of her past. I was supposed to be empress, she whispered, her voice bitter. I was the supreme commander of the Third Fleet. They called me Sayalari the Victorious. I had just secured the Grishnak systems. My father was to announce my succession at the Solstice Gala. She pointed to a data port. Bring me the archives from 2 years ago. He did. The holoprojector flared to life, showing her, standing, tall, proud, in silver and red battle armor. She was ferocious. She was magnificent. Then the accident. She spat, the word a curse. A plasma conduit ruptured on my flagship. It vaporized my honor guard. It did this. She slapped her thigh. While I was floating in a regeneration tank. My cousin, Vorlag, the worm, the shadow crawler, presented the council with evidence of my recklessness. He said I was too aggressive, too unstable to rule. He said I was a danger to the dynasty. She gestures at the hollow. By the time I woke up, he was wearing the robe of power. He was the acting regent, and I became this, the broken princess, the cautionary tale. Carter watched the image of the warrior princess, then looked at the woman before him. He took your power, he said quietly. He took your legs. He took your future. He took everything, she hissed. No, Carter said. He left you alive. That was his mistake. Sayalari's head snapped up. What? You are still here. You are still angry. You are still thinking. You are not broken, Your Highness. You are just gathering your strength. She stared at him, her heart hammering. He was the first person who had not looked at her with pity. He looked at her with respect. And you, Carter the janitor, she countered, her voice soft. You who speak of ashes and burnt worlds? What was your fire? He stood, walking to the great window, looking out at the sprawling alien city. I wasn't always a cleaner. I led a resistance cell. On Earth, Sector 9. We thought we could make a difference. We thought we could show the Empire that humans were not pets. We had a network. We had a plan. We were going to sabotage the primary jump gate. What happened? A trap. Betrayal. Someone sold us out for extra rations and a better work permit. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. They didn't just arrest us. They cleansed the sector. Men, women, children, everyone. He turned back to her, his face a bleak mask. They killed my wife, my daughter. They killed everyone I ever knew. They kept me alive as an example. They put me in the re-education camps. But I was too stubborn. So they gave me a mop, a life of service. Now I just wash what remains. The room was utterly silent. Sayalari felt a strange alien sensation. Her eyes were burning. She, a Thalorian princess, was weeping, not for herself, but for him. He had finished the massage. He was gathering his things to leave. Her stomach rumbled, a small, embarrassing, mortal sound. She flushed. I have not eaten. He paused. He looked at her, truly looked at her. Her face was pale, strained from the emotion. He nodded. He walked to her replicator, punched in a code. He had memorized her favorites, and a small bowl of heated, nutrient-rich paste materialized. He also, on his own authority, replicated a small, flat piece of earth bread. He brought the tray to her. She reached for the spoon, but her hand was trembling, a combination of emotional exhaustion and muscular fatigue from the massage. He looked at her shaking hand, then at her face. "Allow me," he said. This was more intimate than the massage. This was different. This was a nurse's service, a partner. She was the mighty Sayalari, and she was about to be fed by hand, like an infant. She looked at his steady, calloused hand, and she nodded. He did not use the spoon. He broke off a small piece of the bread and scooped a tiny portion of the warm paste. He held it to her lips. Say opened her mouth. He fed her. Slowly. Patiently. Bite by bite. The room was filled with a profound, aching tenderness. It was a communion. Two broken, fallen warriors, sharing a meal in the dark. On the final bite, his thumb, rough from his work, brushed the corner of her soft, silver lips. Her breath hitched. A jolt, more powerful than the nerve stimulator, shot through her. His hand froze. Their eyes locked. The space between them crackled. It was not a princess and janitor. It was not alien and human, and it was a man and woman, and it was a spark. He slowly, carefully pulled his hand away. He set the tray down. His own breathing was unsteady. "I should go," he said, his voice husky. He turned, walking to the door. "Carter." He stopped, his hand on the door sensor, his back to her. She was looking down at her hands, which were no longer shaking. Her voice was a low, trembling whisper. "They gave you to me to humiliate me. A broken human for a broken princess. A final insult from my father." She looked up, her blue star eyes finding his dark form across the room. They were shining, not with tears, but with a new, terrifying fire. "But you're the only one who makes me feel alive again." The quiet in the palace had curdled, the silence that Carter had grown accustomed to, the heavy tomb-like stillness of Sayalari's chambers, had been replaced by a new, sharp tension that permeated the entire royal wing. Guards spoke in lower, harsher whispers. Their movements were jerky, their silver faces tight with anxiety. Carter felt it on the sanitation crews. He heard it in the brief, coded exchanges in the maintenance tunnels. Rebellion. The word was a plasma spark in the air. The Grishnak systems, the ones Sayalari had conquered and pacified, were on fire. They had not taken well to the rule of her cousin. Lord Vorlag, they had been loyal to Sayalari, the warrior princess. They saw Vorlag for the shadow crawler he was. The unrest made Vorlag look weak, and a weak Thalor regent was a dangerous thing. Sayalari felt the tension more than anyone. She was a prisoner, but she was not deaf. She still had access to certain frequencies, backdoor channels into the council data streams that Vorlag's clumsy internal security had failed to purge. She sat in her chair, her face illuminated by the pale blue light of a holographic feed, listening. It was not a meeting about her. First, it was a strategy session. Vorlag's advisors, their voices were smooth, bureaucratic, and utterly cold. The Grishnak rebellion is using her as a symbol, one advisor said, his voice a low thrum. They are calling her Sailari the Betrayed. As long as she remains here, visible, she is a rallying point for them. She is a reminder of her own competence, which only highlights the Regent's struggles. Then the solution is simple, another voice replied. She must no longer be visible. She is an embarrassment to the dynasty, a broken relic. The Emperor, her father, agrees he is tired of the situation. A state funeral? Too public. It would make her a martyr. No. We need administrative finality. Lord Vorlag has already approved the plan. We relocated her. For her own dignity, of course, for her own protection. Sailari's blood went cold. Her hand, resting on the chair's arm, clenched. The cryogenic vault at the polar facility, the one reserved for delicate royal matters. She will be logged as in long-term medical stasis. She will be comfortable. She will feel nothing. It is a dignified end for what was once a great warrior. A state funeral. Not for her body, but for her consciousness. We can schedule the transfer for the end of the week. A dignified end. A tomb of ice. They were going to bury her alive, to erase her, to turn off her mind because it was inconvenient. She terminated the feed. The room was plunged into darkness, but her eyes were burning. Her rage was a physical thing, a cold, sharp, and utterly pure blade. She would not let them. That night, the sky broke. A violent electrical storm lashed the palace, the wind howling against the window wall, the rain coming down in sheets that blurred the glowing city lights below. The room was dark, the air crackling with ozone. Carter arrived for the third cycle ritual. The moment the door hissed shut behind him, he knew something was wrong. The air was electric, not just from the storm, but from her. She was not in her usual place. Her chair was gone, moved to the far side of the room. She was by the great window, a silver silhouette against the flashing, rain-lashed glass. "Your Highness," he said, his voice quiet. "Do you hear that? Human?" she asked, her voice tight, strained. "That is the sound of the universe trying to tear itself apart. A fitting soundtrack." He approached slowly. "Sailari?" He had never used her name. She did not turn. "They are coming for me, Carter, my dear cousin, my loving father. They have decided that the broken princess is too loud, even in her silence. They are going to put me in a box in the dark and turn me off." "What?" "A cryogenic vault," she spat, her voice breaking. "They are going to freeze me, for my dignity. They are going to end me because my life is an inconvenience to their political maneuvers." He was standing beside her now. He could see the reflection of the lightning in her wide, furious eyes. "They will not," he said. It was a simple statement. A fact. She finally turned to him, her face a mask of such profound, desperate rage that it stole his breath. "And who will stop them? You? The janitor? My pet? You are the only living soul who has been in this room in months. Aside from the drones that bring my food, you are all I have, and they are going to take me from this tomb and put me in a colder one." Her chest was heaving. She was trembling, not with fear, but with a fury so large it had nowhere to go. She was a supernova trapped in a broken body. "All this time," she whispered, her voice raw, All these nights, your hands, you made me feel warm. You woke me up. For what? So I can feel the ice more keenly when they put me under? We will not let them, he said, his voice firm. We? She laughed, a broken, terrible sound. There is no we. There is just me, my chair, and you, my cleaner. She looked at him, the man who had seen her at her weakest, the man who had fed her, the man who had whispered earth poems in the dark, the man who had, with his patient hands, unlocked the fire she had buried. I hate this, she whispered, her voice choking. I hate them. I hate that I am longing when I should be planning. I hate this. Before he could process it, she was moving, her chair, propelled by her violently trembling hand on the controls, shot forward, closing the space between them. Her hands, strong from gripping the chair, strong from the new exercises he had put her through, grabbed the front of his uniform. She hauled him down. Her face, her beautiful, terrible, silver face, was inches from his. Her eyes were not the eyes of a princess, they were the eyes of a dying star. And she kissed him. It was not a kiss of tenderness. It was a kiss of rage. It was desperate, hungry, and furious. It was a primal scream delivered with her lips. It was a bite, a claim, a desperate drowning act of a woman who was taking the last thing she could take before she was erased. Carter, stunned, froze. His mind went blank. All he knew was the impossible heat of her mouth, the scent of her, like ozone and sorrow. It was a collision, and as her lips crushed against his human mortal body reacted. His hands, without an order from his brain, came up. One hand braced against her chair, the other found her waist, a solid, instinctive grip, holding her, steadying himself. The moment his hand touched her, she broke. A sob, a choked, agonizing sound tore from her throat. The fire vanished, replaced by a sudden becoming shame. She shoved him, her palms flat against his chest, pushing him away with all her strength. Leave, she hissed, her voice shattered. She turned her chair, moving away from him, her shoulders shaking. Get out. Get out. Leave me. Carter stood there, his lips tingling, his heart hammering against his ribs. His hand, which had held her waist, felt scorched. He looked at her back, a picture of absolute regal misery. He said nothing. He turned, his body rigid, and walked to the door. The hiss of its opening was lost in a crack of thunder. He stepped out, and the door slid shut, leaving her alone with the storm and with the ghost of his touch. He did not sleep. He could not. He sat in his tiny, sterile servants' quarters, staring at his hands. He had crossed a line. A princess had kissed him. A princess had ordered him to leave. He was a dead man. He could run. But where? They would find him. They would atomize him. But as the adrenaline faded, a different thought emerged. He had held her, and he, the widower, the ghost, had felt a spark. He was not just a janitor, and she was not just a relic. He was terrified, not of the guards, but of her, and for her. He knew what the kiss was. It was not seduction. It was a detonation. It was the last desperate act of a woman about to be executed. The next day, he made a choice. He scrubbed his boots twice. He put on his gray uniform. He clipped his sanitation unit to his belt. At the 7th hour, precisely, he stood before her obsidian doors. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves, and pressed the entry chime. The doors hissed open. She was there, in the center of the room, in her chair. She was pale. The kohl around her eyes was smudged as if she had wept, or had not slept. She watched him enter, her face a perfect cold, silver mask. She was braced for anything, for his fear, for his accusation, for his pity, for his absence. Carter walked in, stopped 5 feet inside the door, and inclined his head. "Your Highness," he said, his voice flat, calm, and utterly normal. "The particle count in the air seems high. I will begin with the filters." Sayalari stared at him. He was not cowering. He was not trembling. He was not mentioning the kiss. He was not bringing up the cryogenic vault. He was cleaning. He turned his back to her, unclipped his tools, and began methodically, calmly, working on the nearest air filter. He was respecting her. He was giving her back the control she had lost. He was in his own quiet way, telling her that he was not afraid, and that he was not leaving. He was giving her the dignity of the normal. A slow, profound warmth spread through her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with a fragile, aching gratitude. He was the only person in the galaxy who was not trying to use her, or erase her, or pity her. He was simply there. He had let her be furious, and he was still there. The kiss hung between them for days, a silent, charged thing. Sayalari found herself watching him clean, and her hands would tremble, remembering the solid, calloused feel of his palm on her waist. She would touch her own lips, the memory of his, the faint taste of his skin, a ghost on her tongue. The incident and his reaction had changed her. The rage and desperation had cooled, solidifying into something else. A cold, hard resolve. She was not going to be a victim. She was not going to be ice. She was Sayalari. She was watching him one evening, watching the easy, functional strength in his arms as he lifted a heavy filtration unit. "Carter," she said, her voice clear. He turned. "Your Highness, the messages, they have woken my legs, but they have reminded me of something else. My arms, my core." She looked at her own arms, slender, silver, but weak. "I have let them atrophy. I have been so focused on what I lost, I have forgotten what I have. I am weak. I will not be weak any longer." He looked at her, and for the first time, he let a small, approving smile touch his lips. "No, Your Highness, you will not." The nightly ritual changed. The massages continued, but they were now a prelude. Afterwards, he would become her trainer. He was not a healer, and he was not gentle. He was a soldier. He pushed her. "The armrests of your chair," he instructed. "Push. Lift your core. Hold it." She did, her face contorting, her arms shaking under the strain. "I cannot." "Again," he said, his voice flat. He made her use the heavy silk-draped bed frame as a pull-up bar, helping her position her chair underneath it. She would haul her own body weight, grunting, hissing, her silver skin slick with sweat. He would stand there, impassive, counting. "One more, Your Highness." She hated him for it, and she had never felt more alive. She was reclaiming her physical self, one agonizing muscle fiber at a time. One night, she collapsed back into her chair after a grueling set of core exercises, her arms feeling like burnt wires. She was breathing heavily, her hair stuck to her damp temples. "I hate you, human," she breathed. "Yes, Your Highness," he said. He was sitting on his usual stool, cleaning a piece of his sanitation equipment, waiting for her to recover. He pulled a small, worn data pad from his pocket. She, desperate to distract herself from the burning in her muscles, nodded at it. "What is that? More of your sad earth poems?" He looked up, and she saw a flicker of embarrassment in his eyes. "No, Your Highness, it is a joke book. Old Earth. Very old. From before." "A joke?" The concept felt alien. "Thalorians do not have jokes, we have irony and executions. Humans need jokes," he said. The world, it is a difficult place. Laughter is a shield. Read me one, she commanded. He flushed. They are not good. Read, he sighed and looked at the pad. Two Grishnaks walk into a protein bar. The human bartender asks, "What will you have?" The first Grishnak says, "I will have a synthanol." The second Grishnak hits him and says, "He means we will have a synthanol. You always forget the royal we." Carter read it in a flat, dead monotone. Sayalari stared at him. That is not funny. It is just structurally confusing. Carter actually grimaced. I know. It is in the delivery. You are supposed to do the accent. The accent. My daughter, she used to love it when I did the Grishnak accent. Sailari, who had personally negotiated the surrender of the Grishnak High Command, raised an eyebrow. Show me. He looked so deeply uncomfortable, she almost felt sorry for him. Your Highness, That is an order. Janitor, she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. He sighed. He sat up straight, and in a high, warbling, gurgling voice that was a truly terrible, offensive, and utterly absurd imitation of a Grishnak, he repeated the punchline. He means we will have a synthanol. Sayalari stared, a strange sound, a pressure built in her chest. It came out as a snort, a very unroyal, choking snort. Then it burst. She laughed. It was not a giggle or a chuckle. It was a full, loud, ringing peal of genuine, aching laughter. It was a sound that had not been heard in that room, or in her life, for 2 years. It was rusty, and it hurt her newly trained core muscles. But it was real. Carter froze, stunned by the sound. Then he saw her face, her blue eyes bright with tears of mirth, her perfect mouth open in a real unguarded smile, and he smiled back, a true deep smile that reached his own tired eyes. And he laughed with her, a low, quiet laugh, but it was just as real. The sound echoed in the crystal chamber, chasing out the last of the ghosts. The laughter broke the final barrier. The thread of the cryogenic vault was still there, a shadow in the corner. But now, it was a problem for them to solve. The explosion, she said one night, the mood serious again. It was too clean. Vorlag is a worm, but he is clumsy. This was not clumsy. You think it was someone else? Carter was at her console, running a diagnostic. He had become her hands and her trainer. I think he had help. I was looking through my personal archive files, the raw data logs from my flagship, the Indomitable. They locked me out of the fleet command, but they forgot about my personal redundancy copies. I have looked. I am a soldier. I see battle damage. I do not see this. But you were resistant. You know how to look for shadows. You know how to find a rat in the dark. She gave him the access codes. She gave him her authority. For hours. Carter, the human janitor, sat at the console of a Thalorian princess. His calloused fingers, the same ones that cleaned her floors, flew over the holographic keys. He was not looking for an error log. He was looking for a signature. He worked late, long after his shift had ended. Sayalari sat in her chair, watching him, her heart thudding. Then, he stopped. There, he whispered. What? She propelled her chair over. He brought up 2 data logs side by side. This is the engineering log from the plasma conduit, and this is the log from the internal blast doors. He pointed. The conduit did not just rupture. The safety protocols were overridden, and the conduit was manually vented into the command deck. Look at the time code. Then he pointed to the other log. And this? The blast doors to your section. They sealed 1.3 seconds before the conduit was vented. Not after, before. They were not trying to contain the explosion. They were trying to ensure it. They were trapping you. They were trapping your honor guard. Sayalari felt the blood drain from her face. It is worse, Carter said, his voice grim. He highlighted a single corrupted line of code. This timestamp, it has been sliced, edited. It is a very specific clean cut. It is Thalorian internal security, the highest level, the kind a captain of a flagship cannot access. The kind a Lord Regent like Vorlag would. It was not just sabotage. It was an execution, a precise, internal high-level assassination, and it had come from her own bloodline. The room was heavy with the revelation. It was cold. Sayalari was exhausted, from the training, from the laughter, from the terrible, cold truth. Carter began to pack his sanitation kit. It was almost dawn. He had to be gone. Carter. He stopped, his back to her. She was by her bed. She looked at the massive, empty, silken expanse. It was a cold, lonely island. She looked at him, her strength, her trainer, her janitor, her friend. Tonight, she whispered, her voice thick, I do not want to be alone. He turned, his face unreadable. She gestured to the bed, her hand trembling slightly. Not for that. Not for what happened in the storm. Just, I am cold, and I am tired of being afraid in the dark. Will you stay? Just hold me. It was the ultimate vulnerability, not her legs, not her hair, her fear. He looked at her, at the proud, broken, magnificent princess. He saw the terror in her eyes, the terror of the ice, the terror of her cousin, the terror of being alone. He slowly unclipped his service chit from his uniform. He laid it on her console. He walked to the bed. He did not remove his uniform, but he took off his heavy boots. He slid onto the bed. Lying on top of the silken covers, he was stiff, uncertain. Sayalari, using her powerful arms, the ones she had been training, lifted herself from her chair. It was a practiced, clumsy, powerful movement. She swung her body onto the bed beside him. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, her body rigid. A moment passed. Then, Carter moved. He shifted, turning onto his side, and carefully, reverently, he pulled her against his side. He settled one arm over her, his hand resting on her shoulder. He was a solid, warm, living wall. Sayalari let out a breath she had been holding for 2 years. She was not alone. She shifted, her body moving with a strange, new trust, and she rested her head on his chest. She could hear the steady, slow beat of his human heart. They lay like that in the dark, the silence a shared, warm blanket. She was half asleep, her mind finally, blessedly, quiet. When she whispered, her voice muffled against his rough uniform. You unlocked something I buried in the dark, and now it's burning me up inside. He tightened his grip, his own eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. He held her as the first light of the alien dawn broke over the city. The discovery of the sabotage had changed the air in the room. The embers of Sayalari's anger had cooled, forged into a single lethal point. The time for grieving her legs, her past, was over. Now was the time for war. But Carter, ever the pragmatist, knew they were still missing a piece. He trapped you, Carter said, his voice low. He was still at her console, his fingers tracing lines of code that glowed on his skin. He assassinated your guard. He crippled you. But it's not enough. It is not enough for treason, Sayalari corrected, her voice like ice. It is everything. He took my command. He took your command, Carter agreed. But he left the throne. He is not emperor. He is regent. You are still alive. You are still the firstborn. The succession laws. They must still favor you, even in your condition. Otherwise, why the cryogenic vault? Why not a simple, clean accident in your chambers? Sayalari went still. He is regent, because I am medically unfit to rule. The council voted. Did they? Carter's fingers flew, diverting from the military archives to the legislative chambers. Vorlag presented evidence. What law did he use? It took him 2 more hours. 2 hours of slicing through firewalls designed to keep janitors and apparently princesses out of the high legal code. He found it buried, not in the main succession laws, but in a dusty ancient addendum from the age of scarcity. Here, he whispered, his face grim. Subsection 9, the Dynastic Purity Act. It was a law to prevent rulers with infectious diseases from passing on their weakness. It was never about injury. It was about plague. Sayalari propelled her chair closer, reading the screen. Vorlag. He did not use medical evidence. He used this. He declared me unclean. A threat to the bloodline. He did more than that, Carter said, scrolling down. Sayalari, he manipulated it. After your injury, while you were still in the regeneration tank, he convened an emergency session. He proposed an amendment. He highlighted the text. It was new, gleaming with the timestamp of 2 years ago. The amendment redefines dynastic impurity to include any permanent crippling bodily harm that renders the heir incapable of performing the ancient rites of ascension. The rites of ascension, Sayalari breathed, her voice hollow. They require the heir to stand, to walk the 1,000 steps to the sun altar, to kneel. He did not just disinherit me. He weaponized our most sacred traditions against me. He used my paralysis to paint me as a heretic. It was a move of pure, malignant genius. It explained everything. The shame, her father's disgust, the council's unanimous vote. Vorlag had not just taken her legs, he had stolen her very soul in the eyes of his people. He will not get away with it, she said, her voice so quiet it was more dangerous than any scream. He made me a monster. He will learn what monsters do. He's planning to put you in the vault by the end of the week, Carter said, pulling back from the console. We do not have time for a long-range war. We need to get you out of this room, and we need to get you out now. The plan was born from that quiet, lethal rage. It was Sayalari's mind, a brilliant strategic instrument, fused with Carter's underworld, shadow-born pragmatism. They will not move me publicly, Sayalari reasoned, her fingers tapping on her console, not with fury, but with cold, hard calculation. The Grishnak are already using my name. My mysterious medical transfer will be a quiet one, a single unmarked transport from the lower bays, the bays, just below us. The maintenance bays, Carter said, a map already forming in his head. They are 2 levels down, but your doors, they are watched. Even if I get you out, the halls are patrolled. We will not use the halls, he said, standing and walking to the far wall, the one that seemed to be solid crystal. He pressed his hand to a spot that looked no different from any other. A hairline crack, invisible to an untrained eye, appeared. This wing is ancient. Before the current dynasty, there were other rulers who did not always trust each other. This palace is a honeycomb. I know the ways in between the walls. He had been a floater, a ghost, for years. He had cleaned places no one else would go. He had followed pipes and conduits to their sources. He knew the palace's secret, skeletal structure. I can get us from this room behind the walls and down to the maintenance bays, but the bays are locked, biometrically sealed. We cannot cut our way in. We will not have to, Sayalari said, a cruel, thin smile touching her lips. She turned to her console. Vorlag believes I am a broken doll. He does not know I have spent 2 years memorizing his security protocols. He is planning to move me to the polar facility. She began to type, her fingers a blur, slicing into the palace logistical network. I will simply expedite the process. I will file the request myself. She forged a high-level diplomatic transfer, a request from the Xylos sector, her old command, for a cultural artifact, a text on ancient healing, something that would require polar-level cold storage. She encrypted it with Vorlag's own command codes, which she had long since stolen. She set the pickup for tonight, from the maintenance bay directly below them. A transport will be waiting, she said, leaning back. They will be expecting a sealed cryogenic container. They will not be expecting the contents to be awake. The hours leading up to the escape were the longest of Sayalari's life. The tension was a living thing, a third presence in the room. They worked. Carter transferred vital supplies, med packs, nutrient bars, a single plasma cutter into a simple gray satchel. He modified Sayalari's chair, stripping off the ceremonial casing, exposing the raw, high-powered propulsion unit. He made it faster, quieter, but uglier, a tool, not an ornament. As he worked, she watched him, her face tight. He was so focused, so calm. He was back in his element, a resistance fighter preparing for a mission. You are not afraid, she stated, her voice soft. He was splicing a power cell. He did not look up. Fear is a luxury. We can have it later. Right now, we have a timeline. I am not talking about the escape. Carter. She wheeled her chair to the window. The twin moons of Thalor were beginning to rise. One a pale crescent, one a deep, blood orange. I am talking about after, if we get out, if we find allies. They will not see a warrior. They will not see the commander who won the Grishnak systems. They will see this. She gestured to her legs, to the chair. They will see the broken thing Vorlag told them I was. She finally confessed it, the one true dark fear she had not even whispered in the night. He can kill me. He can freeze me. I do not care, but I cannot bear the thought of being forgotten as weak. I would rather die as Sayalari the victorious than live as Sayalari the pitied. Carter finished his work. He stood, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. He walked to her, kneeling before her chair, not as a servant but as an equal, bringing their eyes to the same level. When I was in the camps, he said, his voice low, I saw men, strong men, who had their bodies broken, the ones who did not survive. They were the ones who believed they were their bodies. They were the ones who had forgotten what a weapon is. He tapped his own temple. It is here. He tapped his chest. It is here. Then he looked at her, his gaze so intense it was almost a physical touch. They did not cripple you, Sayalari. They just unbound you. A warrior in a chair is still a warrior. Let them pity you. Let them underestimate you. Let them see the weak, broken princess. It will be the last thing they ever see. A tear, hot and singular, tracked its way down her silver cheek. She did not wipe it away. He had, once again, given her back her own strength. Good, she whispered, her voice hardening. Because I am not leaving this palace as a patient. I am leaving as a general. The hour struck. The third cycle guard change. The shift in the palace's magnetic field told them the transport was landing in the bay below. It was time. Are you ready? Carter asked, shouldering the satchel. No, Sayalari said. Not like this. She wheeled herself to her wardrobe. It was filled with silks, with robes of state, with soft, useless things. But in the back, in a sealed, pressurized compartment, was what she was looking for. When she emerged, Carter's breath caught in his throat. He stared. She was not a princess. She was a Valkyrie. She was a star reborn. She was wearing her royal battle robes. Not the full, heavy armor, but the crimson and silver undersuit, reinforced with micron weave that was stronger than steel. It was modified. Her own hands, her new, powerful arms, had clearly been at work. The heavy leg plates were gone, the fabric cut and restitched, tailored to her seated body. It was a declaration. This is who I am. Now. Her hair was not down. It was braided back in a severe, intricate warrior's knot. Her face was bare of makeup, but her eyes, her blue star eyes, were burning. Now, Sayalari said, her voice the command of 1,000 ships. I am ready. Carter pressed his hand to the wall. The hidden panel hissed open, revealing a dark, narrow opening. After you, Your Highness. She did not hesitate. She maneuvered her stripped-down, high-powered chair into the blackness. Carter slipped in behind her, and the panel slid shut, sealing the luminous crystal prison behind them. They were in the walls. The tunnels were cold, dark, and dripped with moisture. The only sounds were the faint, high-powered hum of her chair's propulsion unit and the sound of Carter's soft-booted feet behind her. He held a small glow rod, casting their shadows long and grotesque against the ancient pipes. The main ventilation shaft is just ahead, he whispered, his voice echoing slightly. It is a 300-foot vertical drop. We will use the service ladder. I cannot climb a ladder, she said, her voice tight. You will not have to. He pulled a coil of high-tensile wire from his pack. I will secure you. It will be a controlled descent. He did. He strapped her chair, and her to her chair, and then to his own harness. He was not just lowering her. He was lowering them both. He took her full weight, his muscles straining, his own old scarred body becoming her new set of legs. They descended into the darkness, foot by foot, until their boots hit the grated floor of the maintenance bay access tunnel. We are close, he breathed, unstrapping her. They moved down the final corridor. It ended in a heavy steel blast door. Carter put his ear to it. He could hear voices. 2 of them, he whispered. Transport crew. They are waiting for the cargo. And they are about to be disappointed, Sayalari whispered back. Carter pulled the plasma cutter. This will be loud. The moment it is through, you go. Do not wait for me. No, she said, her voice firm. Sayalari, this is not a discussion. No, she repeated. You cut, but you do not cut through. You weaken the lock mechanism. I will create a distraction, a medical emergency. He looked at her, confused. Her face was set in a mask of calm, cold calculation. They see a broken princess. Let us give them what they expect. He understood. He nodded. He worked at the lock. The plasma cutter hissed a tiny spitting sound. It took 30 seconds. The metal glowed cherry red. Now, he said. He kicked the door. The lock gave, and the heavy door slid open with a pneumatic groan. They were in the vast, brightly lit maintenance bay. A sleek black transport ship was docked. Its ramp down. 2 Thalorian guards, not transport crew, stood by a large, empty cryogenic container. They spun, their plasma rifles instantly leveling. Halt! One shouted. Who are you? This is a restricted area. Their eyes fell on Sayalari. They saw the crimson battle robes. They saw the chair, and they saw the most famous cripple in the galaxy. Their faces registered shock, confusion. Sayalari, as planned, wheeled herself forward into the light. Please, She gasped, her voice weak, pathetic. "Help me, I do not know where I am." And then she faked the seizure. It was a terrifying, brilliant performance. She threw her head back, her body arching in her chair. A low, guttural sound tore from her throat. Her arms, the ones she had spent weeks strengthening, flailed, spasming wildly. She looked exactly like what they thought she was, a damaged, short-circuiting, broken piece of royalty. The guards were completely undone, their rifles lowered. This was not a threat. This was a medical emergency involving the Emperor's daughter. "By the stars," one guard said, rushing forward, his rifle dangling. "Your Highness, what is wrong?" "Get a healer," the other one said, his eyes wide with panic. They were both focused on her. They were both off balance. They never saw Carter. He moved from the shadows of the tunnel like a ghost. He was not a janitor. He was the man who had led the Sector 9 resistance. His hands, which had massaged her legs, were now weapons. He struck the first guard from behind, one hand clasping the man's mouth, the other driving a hardened steel tool from his satchel into the weak spot at the base of the Thalorian's skull. The guard crumpled without a sound. The second guard heard the thud. He turned, his eyes widening. He had time to open his mouth. He had no time to scream. Carter was on him, a blur of gray motion. It was not a fight. It was an execution, a precise, brutal, and silent takedown. In 3 seconds, both guards were on the ground, unconscious or dead. Sayalari's seizure stopped. She sat in her chair, breathing hard, her body thrumming with adrenaline. She looked at the 2 silver-armored bodies, and then she looked at Carter, who was calmly wiping his tool on a rag. He looked back at her. "Let's go. We have a ship." They found the hideout at dawn. Carter had piloted the transport ship manually, flying it low and fast, using canyons to mask its signature, finally landing it in a hidden rocky alcove a dozen miles from the palace. The place he took her was one of his floater spots, a small, self-contained desert biome, one of the palace's many follies. This one abandoned, it was a dome of glass and steel, the interior a perfect small circle of red sand and towering crystalline rock formations. It was warm, dry, and hidden, and in the bruised pre-dawn light, the twin moons of Thalor, the crescent and the blood orange, shone down through the glass ceiling. They were safe, for now. They sat on the sand, Sayalari having transferred from her chair to a flat rock. Carter sat cross-legged opposite her, opening the satchel. He pulled out 2 nutrient bars and a single hydro flask. He gave 1 bar to her, and the flask. They ate in silence, sharing the water. It was a mirror of the night he had fed her. But now, they were not princesses and janitors. They were fugitives. They were partners. She finished, and she looked at her legs. They were scared, not just from the explosion, but from the surgeries, a network of pale, silvery lines that glowed faintly in the moonlight. She hated them. They were the source of her shame, the map of her weakness. Carter watched her. He saw her face harden, the old self-loathing returning. He moved, shuffling on his knees through the sand, until he was before her. She looked at him, her eyes wary. "You are staring," she said. "Yes," he said. He did not look at her face. He looked at her legs. He reached out, his calloused janitor's hand, his soldier's hand, and he touched her. Not to massage, not to heal. He touched the worst of the scars, a livid, puckered mark on her thigh. He traced it with his finger, as if he were reading a map. Sayalari trembled, a violent shudder. "They are ruined," she whispered. He looked up at her, his dark eyes holding hers in the moonlight. "They are a testament," he said, his voice rough. "They are the story of the fire you walked through." And then, slowly, reverently, he lowered his head and he kissed her, not her lips. He kissed the scar. Sailari let out a choked, broken sound. He kissed the ruined skin, the dead nerves, the source of all her pain and all her shame. He kissed her leg as if it were a holy thing. He lifted his head, his lips still brushing her skin. "You do not need to walk," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion she could not name. "To conquer a world." That broke her, the last wall, the last defense. She looked at this man, this human, this ghost, who had seen all of her, the rage and the fear, the brokenness and the fire. She reached out, her silver hand finding his face. She pulled him to her. She kissed him. This kiss was not the storm. It was not the rage. This was the quiet after. It was slow. It was emotional. It was a question and an answer. They made love there, on the red sand, under the light of the twin moons. It was not the frantic, hungry coupling of animals. It was a slow, almost reverent discovery. His hands, which knew her muscles, now learned her skin. Her hands, which she had used to train, now explored him. For her, it was a reclaiming. It was the first time she had been touched, truly touched, as a woman, since the explosion. It was a reignition of a body she had thought was dead. And as he moved, his touch careful, his passion deep, she felt not just pleasure, but connection. She was not just a mind in a chair. She was a whole person. She was alive. She trembled in his arms, the climax washing over her, a wave of heat and light and feeling so profound it felt like a resurrection. She lay against his chest, her head over his heart, her body tingling, her mind finally blissfully clear. She whispered, her voice a near inaudible vibration against his skin. Now I remember what power feels like." He held her, his own past, his own ghosts, finally, blessedly, silent. He had been holding her, but now he was holding on to her. That moment of intimacy was a crucible. It burned away the princess and the janitor. It burned away the past. All that was left was the two of them and the future. She lifted her head, her silver hair spilling over his shoulder. Her blue star eyes were not soft. They were burning. "We will not just survive, Carter," she vowed, her voice low and fierce. "We will not just hide. We will find my loyalists. We will find Grishnak. We will go back to that palace." She touched his face, her hand now a warrior's, a queen's. "And we will burn his new illegal heretical laws to the ground, with him standing on them. We will give the power back to those who deserve it." He looked into her eyes. He saw his own redemption. "Yes, Your Highness," he said, but his eyes said Sailari. "Yes, we will." The red sands of the biome had transformed from a place of intimacy into a command center. The air inside the glass dome, once silent save for the hum of ventilation, was now thick with the static of encrypted comms and the low murmur of rebellion. Carter had reached out to the shadows, and the shadows had answered. Jax, a rogue human engineer with a cybernetic eye and a price on his head, sat cross-legged on the sand, splicing power couplings for a portable shield generator. Opposite him stood General Kalen, a towering Thalorian in exiled gray armor. Kalen had been Sailari's second-in-command during the Grishnak campaigns, a man who had resigned his commission the day Vorlag took the regency. He looked at the princess in her modified chair, his face a mask of grim loyalty. "We have 4 destroyers in orbit holding position," Kalen reported, his voice deep and gravelly. "The captains are loyal, but they are waiting for a sign. They will not fire on the palace without proof that the regent is illegitimate. If we miss, we are just insurgents." They will have their proof, Sayalari said. She sat near the center of the makeshift camp, her spine rigid, her eyes scanning the holographic map Carter had projected onto the floor. And they will have their sign. Carter stood beside her. He wore a mismatched set of blast armor over his janitor's uniform, a visual testament to their jagged alliance. His shoulder brushed hers, a silent anchor in the chaos. The broadcast array is ready, Carter said. Jax has bypassed the Imperial firewall. We have a 3-minute window before they trace the signal back to this biome. You have to make it count. Sayalari nodded. She wheeled herself to the recording drone Jax had set up. She did not smooth her hair. She did not cover the scars on her arms. She wore her modified battle robes, the ones she had escaped in, dust-stained and real. Let them see me, she commanded. The drone flared to life, across the Thalor system, on millions of screens from the high-spire apartments of the capital to the grimy ore refineries of the Outer Rim. The regular programming of state propaganda flickered and died. In its place appeared the face of the dead princess. She looked directly into the lens, her blue star eyes burning with a cold, terrifying clarity. Citizens of Thalor, soldiers of the Empire, I am Sayalari of the Third Dynasty. You were told I was broken. You were told I was weak. You were told I was gone. She leaned forward, the camera capturing the fierce set of her jaw. But I am here, and I have seen the rot at the heart of our throne. 2 years ago, an explosion on the Indomitable took my legs. I was told it was an accident. It was not. It was a strike ordered by the man who now wears the regent's robe. Lord Vorlog did not just cripple a princess. He sabotaged a flagship. He murdered 200 loyal soldiers of the Royal Guard to ensure I would never walk to the throne. Behind her, on the feed, Carter triggered the data stream. The logs he had sliced from the palace archives began to scroll next to her face. The cut fuel lines, the overridden safety protocols, the timestamps bearing Vorlog's personal encryption key. He rules you with lies, Sayalari's voice rang out, steel and fire. He calls me unclean to hide his own treason, but I will tell you this. A ruler is not made by legs that walk. A ruler is made by a spine that does not bend. I am coming for him. Stand with me, or stand in my way, but know that the storm is here. The feed cut. Silence reigned in the biome for a heartbeat. Then, the reality of what they had done crashed down. Signal traced, Jax shouted, his cybernetic eyes spinning wild red. They found us. Hard lock on our coordinates. Then we have dropships incoming, fast movers, 2 minutes out. Scramble. Kalen roared, grabbing his plasma rifle. Defensive positions, protect the princess. Carter was already moving. He grabbed Sayalari's chair, spinning her toward the rear of the dome where the rocky formations offered cover. We need to get you to the transport. Now. No. Sayalari said, pulling a heavy pulse pistol from her lap. We fight. If we run now, the signal looks like a bluff. We hold the ground until Kalen's support ships arrive. The sky above the glass dome turned black with the silhouettes of Vorlag's elite kill squads. The glass shattered. It did not break. It evaporated under the barrage of heavy plasma fire. Shards of superheated crystal rained down like deadly hail. The sound was deafening, a roar of wind and fire. Thalorian shock troopers dropped from the sky on grav lines, their armor black, their weapons glowing green. Kalen's exiles opened fire, streaks of blue energy cutting through the dust. Left flank, Carter shouted, shoving Sayalari behind a pillar of red rock as a grenade detonated where she had been a second before. The explosion threw him against the stone, knocking the wind out of him. Sayalari spun her chair, firing with precision, Two troopers dropped, their armor smoking. She was a blur of motion, her chair responding to her touch like an extension of her will. She was not a stationary target. She was a mobile turret, lethal and fast. But there were too many of them. Vorlag had sent a legion to kill one woman. "Target acquired!" a trooper yelled, leveling a heavy cannon at Sayalari. Carter saw it. He saw the charging whine of the barrel. He saw Sayalari engaged with another enemy. Her back turned. He did not think. He launched himself from the cover of the rock. He hit her chair, shoving it violently to the side just as the cannon fired. The blast missed Sayalari by inches, but the concussion wave caught Carter mid-air. A secondary bolt of superheated plasma slammed into his side, punching through his mismatched armor. He hit the sand, rolling, a scream trapped in his throat. The smell of cauterized flesh and ozone filled the air. "Carter!" Sayalari screamed. The sound tore from her, raw and terrified. She killed the trooper who had fired, putting a bolt through his visor without blinking. She spun her chair, ignoring the chaos, ignoring the battle, and reached Carter. He was pale, clutching his side. Blood, bright and red, seeped between his fingers, mixing with the red sand. His eyes were unfocused. "Go!" he wheezed, his teeth gritted against the agony. "Get to the transport. Kalen can cover you." "Shut up," she hissed. "I am not leaving you." A fresh wave of troopers landed, cutting them off from the rest of the group. They were isolated, pinned down behind a crumbling rock formation. "Give us the princess," the squad leader boomed, his voice amplified, "and we will make your death quick. Human." Sayalari looked at Carter. He was fading. If she stayed, they would be overrun. If she tried to move him, she would be exposed. She looked at her legs, useless, dead weight. Then she looked at Carter's face, the face that had looked at her scars with reverence, the face that had smiled when she laughed. She holstered her weapon. She grabbed Carter by his harness. "Hold on," she said. She threw herself from her chair. She hit the sand hard, the impact jarring her spine, but she did not stop. She used her arms, the arms Carter had helped her train, the arms that had pulled her body weight up the silk sheets, and she began to drag him. She crawled. She dug her elbows into the abrasive sand, hauling herself and the dead weight of the man she loved. Her legs dragged behind her, heavy and numb, furrows in the dust. It was agonizing. It was humiliating. It was the most powerful thing she had ever done. The troopers hesitated. They stared at the sight. The crippled princess, the fallen royalty, crawling in the dirt to save a human janitor. "Fire!" the leader commanded, shaking off the shock. Sayalari covered Carter with her own body. She curled over him, a silver shield against the coming fire. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end, her hand gripping his blood-slicked armor. The sky split open. It was not plasma fire. It was the roar of engines, massive, deafening engines. A heavy dropship, painted in the colors of the Grishnak resistance, screamed over the shattered dome. Its cannons opened up, a torrent of suppressing fire that turned the shock troopers into mist. General Kalen's voice crackled over the comms. "Your message was received. Highness, the fleet has declared for Sayalari. We are clearing the LZ." The dropship slammed down, the ramp crushing a rock formation. Medics and soldiers poured out, forming a protective ring of steel around the woman in the sand. Sayalari lifted her head. Her face was caked with red dust and sweat. She looked down at Carter. His eyes fluttered open. "You," he whispered, a faint, bloody smile touching his lips. "You are stubborn." "I learned from the best," she whispered back. She allowed the medics to take him only after she had watched them stabilize him. She allowed them to lift her back into her chair only after she was sure he was breathing. Then, she turned to General Kalen. Is he secure? She asked, pointing to Carter. He is stable, Highness. We have a med bay on the ship. Good. She wiped the dust from her face, leaving a streak of war paint across her silver skin. Take us to the palace. I have a cousin to evict. The return to the palace was not a battle. It was a procession. The orbital blockade had turned, their guns now pointed at Vorlag's private sanctum. The city below was in the streets, millions of citizens marching toward the gates, chanting her name. The blast doors of the throne room did not open. They were blown off their hinges by Kaelin's heavy infantry. Smoke billowed into the vast gold and obsidian hall. Vorlag sat on the high throne. He was alone. His guards had fled. His advisors had vanished. He wore the heavy jeweled robes of the regent, but he looked small. He looked like a child playing dress-up. Through the smoke, a sound emerged, the high-pitched, steady hum of a propulsion engine. Sayalari floated in. She was flanked by General Kaelin and a dozen Grishnak warriors, but she led them. She had refused to clean up. She still wore the dust of the desert. Her battle robes were torn. Her hair was loose, wild and tangled. She stopped at the foot of the dais. Vorlag stood, his hands shaking as he gripped the armrests. He tried to sneer, but his lip trembled. "Look at you," he spat, his voice echoing thinly in the vast room. "You look like a beggar, a filthy, broken thing dragging itself out of the dirt." He pointed a trembling finger at her legs. "You think you can rule? You are less than whole. You are a fragment of a woman. You cannot even climb the steps to take this seat." The room held its breath. The soldiers, the lingering courtiers hiding in the shadows. They all watched. Sayalari looked at the steps. The 1,000 steps of the rite of ascension. Then she looked at Vorlag. She touched the controls on her armrest. Her chair rose. It floated higher, ascending effortlessly, rising above the steps, rising above the dais, until she was hovering slightly above him. She looked down at him. "I do not need to climb steps, cousin," she said, her voice amplified, filling the hall. "I have risen above them." She signaled Kaelin. The general stepped forward, holding a projector. The air filled with voices, not the data logs this time, but audio, intercepted comms, Vorlag's voice, whining, petty, ordering the death of his own kin. "Make sure she suffers. I want her spirit broken before the body dies. Give her the human. Let her rot in shame." The recording played on a loop. Vorlag's face went gray. "You are a monster," he whispered. "No!" Sayalari roared, the sound startling him into falling back against the throne. "I am what you made me." She drove her chair forward, forcing him to scramble back. "You call me less than whole? You call me broken because I cannot walk? You are terrified. Vorlag, you are terrified not of my weakness, but of my strength." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "You are terrified of what I have become with nothing but will and scars. I crawled through the dirt to save the man I love. What have you ever done but hide behind walls and kill from the dark?" The doors to the side of the hall burst open. It was not soldiers. It was the palace guard, the ones who had been sworn to protect the emperor, finally turning on the usurper. They marched in, weapons leveled at Vorlag. "Lord Vorlag," the captain of the guard said, his voice cold. "You are under arrest for high treason and regicide." Vorlag looked around wildly. He looked at Sayalari, hovering like an avenging angel. He slumped, the fight draining out of him. He was nothing but a small man in a big chair. As they dragged him away, stripping the robes from his shoulders, the room erupted. Soldiers, courtiers, guards. They cheered. It was a roar of relief, of vindication. Sayalari watched him go. She felt no joy, only a vast, crushing exhaustion. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the broadcast, the battle, the drag through the sand, and the confrontation suddenly evaporated. The world tilted. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her hands slipped from the control of her chair. Sayalari! It was not Kalen. It was a voice ragged with pain, but strong. Carter. He had limped into the hall, supported by a medic, his side heavily bandaged, his face pale as death. He had refused to stay on the ship. Sayalari's chair lowered, landing softly on the dais. She slumped forward, her strength gone. Carter shook off the medic. He stumbled up the steps, gritting his teeth against the pain in his side. He reached her just as she began to slide from the seat. He caught her. He fell to his knees, taking her weight, ignoring the tearing agony in his own wound. He pulled her against him, holding her tight. The cheering of the crowd faded into a dull roar in the background. For Sayalari, there was only the smell of him, antiseptic, sweat, and dust, the smell of home. She looked up at him, her eyes heavy, half-lidded, her hand reached up, trembling, to touch his cheek. "You came," she whispered. "Always," he rasped. She rested her forehead against his chest. She looked at the empty throne, then back at the janitor holding her on the floor of the palace. "They gave me to you like garbage," she whispered, a tear cutting through the dust on her face. "They thought we were both trash to be thrown away. But you—" She gripped his shirt, her fingers tightening. "You built a weapon from the ashes." Carter kissed her forehead, holding her as the new Empress of Thaler closed her eyes. Safe at last in the arms of the man who had helped her burn the Empire down. The rite of ascension was a tradition carved from millennia of pomp and rigid law. It required the new emperor to climb the 1,000 steps to the sun altar, to kneel in fealty to the stars, and to rise with the blessing of the celestial light. Sayalari, in her first act as ruler, abolished it. She ascended to the throne of the Thaler Empire not on her feet, but in her chair. She did not wear the heavy ancient robes of her ancestors. She wore the dust-stained crimson battlesuit she had been wearing when she'd taken the palace. She did not kneel. She did not ask the stars for a blessing. She faced the assembled, terrified, and hopeful masses in the grand hall, and she gave her word. Her father, the old emperor, was not present. He had been quietly moved to a comfortable, remote estate, his signature of abdication a trembling, shame-filled scrawl. Sayalari had taken the throne by conquest, by popular support, and by the sheer, undeniable force of her will. She was not a symbol of dynastic perfection. She was a beacon of brutal, beautiful resilience. Her first decree, signed on the dais before the cheering crowds had even dispersed, was not about taxes or territories. It was the Human Emancipation Act. It was a document that ripped through the very fabric of the empire. It declared that all humans, all beings, were elevated from second-class citizens, from pets and indentured servants, to full protected citizens of the Thaler Empire. It granted them rights, representation, and most shocking of all, a path to land ownership and military commission. The old silver-skinned nobility in the hall nearly fainted. The human servants lining the back walls, the ones who had been invisible just an hour before, wept openly. Her second act was to create a new title, Special Ambassador to Terran Systems. It was a post with sweeping, unprecedented power, to act as a bridge between the two cultures, to oversee the integration of human colonies, and to hold a permanent voting seat on her new civilian council. She gave the title and the crimson sash of office to Carter. He had tried to refuse. He had stood in her new vast royal quarters, the same ones he had once mopped, his side bandaged, his face pale but resolute. "Sayalari, I am not a diplomat," he had argued, his voice rough. "I am a janitor, a soldier. I do not know how to speak to nobles." "I do not want a diplomat," she had said, wheeling her chair to him, her hand resting on his arm. "I do not want someone who knows how to lie. I want someone who knows how to listen. I want someone who knows what it is to be a weed in a garden. I want you." She had pulled him down, her kiss fierce and tasting of victory and ozone. "Besides," she whispered against his lips, "who else in this galaxy can I trust to scrub this place clean?" He accepted. The public saw him as her ambassador. The court, with scandalized, whispering horror, saw him as her lover. They were, quietly, both right. Their nights were stolen, islands of peace in a sea of political chaos. The Empire was a massive ship, and Sayalari was turning it against the tide. She worked 18-hour days, negotiating with furious trade guilds, placating panicked planetary governors, and rebuilding a military that had been fractured by her coup. She would return to her chambers late. The weariness settled deep in her bones. And Carter would be there, not in his ambassador's sash, but in his simple, soft spun trousers and shirt. He would be waiting, reading one of his old Earth data pads or just sitting by the window watching the city lights. He would take her from her chair, his hands, now healed but still scarred, strong and familiar. He would lift her, his muscles barely straining. He, too, had been training, and carry her to the bed. He would rub her shoulders, his touch firm, chasing away the tension. He would massage her legs, the old ritual, not for healing now, but for connection, for memory. "The council is furious about the new trade tariffs," she murmured one night, her face pressed into his pillow, her hair a silver flood across the dark sheets. "And General Kalen says the fleet on the outer rim is threatening to mutiny. I am drowning in this. Carter." He kept massaging, his touch steady. "They are not mutinying. Sailari. They are just loud. They are testing the new Empress. Yell back. They are soldiers. They respect it." She turned, propping herself up on one elbow, a faint smile on her lips. "And the council? They are nobles. They are not used to sharing. Take their favorite, shiny toy away for a week. They will forget the tariffs and just beg to have their shiny toy back." She looked at him, her blue star eyes soft in the dim light. "You are far too clever for a janitor." "I had to be," he said, his own smile faint. "Or I would have been mopping forever." She laughed, a real unguarded sound. She pulled him closer, her body strong and scarred, fitting against his. "You are a menace, Ambassador. I rule 36 star systems by day, and I come home only to be completely ruled by one stubborn human janitor at night." "As it should be, Your Highness," he whispered. And he kissed her. Carter, for his part, was a walking, breathing contradiction to the entire palace. He refused royal clothing. He was offered uniforms of silk and micron weave, ambassadorial robes threaded with spun light. He politely declined them all. He walked the gleaming, luminous halls of the Thalor Palace in his own worn black boots, his gray trousers, and his simple, high-collared shirts. He looked, to the horror of the nobility, like a servant, a very, very confident servant who happened to have a key to the Empress's private chambers. But his effect was profound. The human staff, the cooks and the engineers, the cleaners and the data clerks, saw him. They saw the man who had come from their ranks, the man who had not forgotten them. They saw him nod to them, his eyes meeting theirs with quiet respect. He was not one of them any longer, but he had been one of them. And in his worn boots he was a silent, walking promise. The Emancipation Act was not just words, it was real. The alien nobility at first sneered. They saw him as Sayalari's pet, the human she had elevated as an insult to them. But then they saw him in council. He did not speak often. He just sat and listened, his dark eyes missing nothing. When he did speak, his voice was quiet, logical, and cut straight through their self-important bluster. He spoke of supply chains, not honor. He spoke of logistics, not tradition. He spoke the language of the ground, and Sayalari, the Empress, listened to him. They learned, very quickly, not to underestimate the Janitor. The reforms began to spread. The Grishnak, her first allies, were granted full system autonomy in a new treaty of equals. This sent a shock wave through the rebellious colonies. They had expected an iron fist. They had expected Sayalari the victorious to come and crush them. Instead, Sayalari the reformer sent envoys. She sent Carter. He went to the rebelling systems, not in a battleship, but in the small black transport ship they had stolen. He met with rebel leaders in dusty cantinas and hidden bunkers. And he offered them peace. He offered them trade. He offered them equality. The Empress does not want your fealty, he told a skeptical, one-eyed Grishnak war chief. She wants your partnership. The old empire is dead. She is building something new. You can either be a part of it, or you can be a memory. The rebellions, one by one, quieted. The fire of revolution which Vorlog had sparked was being transformed by Sayalari into the warm light of reform. The first anniversary of her ascension was a date celebrated across the system. It was not a holy day, but a day of progress. And Sayalari was scheduled to give a planetary address, to speak to all her people. They stood on the grand balcony of the palace, the same one her father had used to address a subservient populace. But Sayalari was not alone. Carter stood beside her, in his simple dark clothes, a quiet, solid presence at her right hand. The crowd below was a sea of faces, human and Thalorian, Grishnak and Zothian, all looking up. Sayalari was not in her chair. She was standing. Jax, the rogue human engineer, his cybernetic eye gleaming with pride, had built it for her. It was a cybernetic exosuit frame, a sleek, silver construct that was less armor and more a set of stylized, minimalist new limbs. It was not for walking. She was rooted to a small, secure platform. But it held her upright. It was powered, not by her dead nerves, but by her. She was strapped in, her arms, her core, her sheer, indomitable strength, keeping her balanced. It was an agony to hold the position. It was a statement. She was standing on her own, beside her man, to address her people. Carter's hand rested on the small of her back, a physical and emotional support. She took a breath, her voice ringing out over the silent, expectant city. People of Thaler, she began, for 1,000 years. This empire was built on a lie, the lie of perfection, the lie that strength meant flawlessness. The lie that some are born to rule and others are born to serve. She looked down at her own metal-encased legs, then out at the crowd. This empire thought broken things had no value. Her eyes found Carter's. He looked back at her, his dark eyes full of pride so deep it was almost painful. We were taught that what was damaged should be hidden, that what was different was unclean. They gave me a human janitor as an insult, a reminder of my own brokenness. She reached out, and her silver royal hand took his scarred, human one. She held it up for the entire galaxy to see. But the human they gave me, the man they thought was garbage, he did not see a broken relic. He saw a spark. He saw a weapon. He saw a queen. He, and all like him, are the future of this empire, because he unlocked the fire they could never kill. The roar from the crowd was a physical, elemental force, a wave of sound that shook the very foundations of the palace. It was a cheer of hope, of revolution, of a new, shared, and equal future. Later that night, the city was quiet. The celebrations had faded to a warm hum. Sailari was back in her chair, the exo-frame dismissed. It had taken everything she had. She was exhausted, but she was vibrating with triumph. They were on her private balcony, the one that overlooked her prison garden. But it was not a prison any longer. The walls were down. It was open to the city. In the distance, a new structure was rising, floodlights illuminating a framework of steel and crystal. "What is that?" Carter asked, joining her. A blanket draped over his arm. He settled it over her legs, his old, familiar gesture. "That," Sailari said, her voice soft, "is the future." She pointed. "The Academy of Unified Study, the first of its kind, where Thalorians will learn engineering from humans, and humans will learn statesmanship from Thalorians, where we will study as equals, where your daughters would have gone." He went very still. He looked at the glowing structure, his throat tight. He had told her about his daughter, in one of their dark, shared confessions. He had told Sailari her name. He put his hand on her shoulder, his grip tight. They watched the construction, the welding sparks like new stars being born in the night. The silence between them was easy, a comfortable shared thing built from fire and trust. Sailari reached up, her silver fingers finding his. She laced them together, his rough skin against her smooth, metallic-sheened skin. She looked at their joined hands. "And to think," she whispered, her voice full of a wonder that still, after all this time, surprised her. All this, all of it, began with a mop, a whisper, and a kiss after midnight.